Okay, well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Becky, the Chief Executive Officer of the English Association, and I'm really pleased to welcome you this afternoon. A quick word about the EA. We are a learned society and a subject association which was founded in 1906. We promote, support and defend the discipline of English studies, and we cover all stages of education from primary and early years through to secondary and further education to higher education and beyond. And we cover all parts of the discipline across language, linguistics, literature, and creative writing. Events like this one are made possible by the fantastic contribution of our volunteer speakers. So thank you so much to Jake, Becky, and Sita for coming along this evening and sharing their time and expertise with us. Our members also make it possible to keep these events free and open to all by paying their membership fees. So if you would like to contribute to the national conversation about English and help support our discipline, please do consider joining us. It costs just £26 now for the rest of the year to join us to support our events and campaigning work, and you'll get access to a range of member benefits, including online access to all of our journals. Right, so now it is my great pleasure to hand over to tonight's panel, starting with Becky. Thank you.
Hello everyone, welcome. Welcome to our session on our rights. So talking about human rights in the classroom and talking about this book as well, which we will come to later. My name is Becky Smith. We're going to start with a couple of just bios from us and then we will get into the juicy stuff. So Jake, do you want to kick us off with your bio first?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Jake Hope, and I edited Our Rights, a book that Becky was just showing us. And yeah, my background really is very, very firmly in libraries. Libraries made a huge difference to me as I was growing up. And so I wanted to work in libraries and help support sort of the transformational effect that an impact that libraries can have. An impact that I think actually ties very, very neatly and aligns very neatly with sort of children's rights and human rights. And my main job at the moment is probably looking after the Carnegie Medals, which are the UK's oldest children's book awards.
Amazing, thank you, Jake. Sita, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, hello, I'm Sita. Sita Kenyon. I'm an education officer at Amnesty International UK. So my background is actually in teaching. So I taught English literature and language to sixth form students for a couple of years. And then I made the move over to working in community learning in heritage before kind of settling into human rights and starting at Amnesty in the education team. I've been there now for a number of years. I manage in my role two kind of big programs. One of them is a creative education program at Amnesty, and the flagship project within that is Words That Burn, which is all about exploring human rights through poetry with children, and it is secretly my favorite project. Yeah, that's a bit about me, and I know I'll be talking a bit later, but yeah, hand back over to you, Becky.
Thank you. Yes, so as I already said, I am Becky. I'm a primary school teacher, reading for pleasure consultant, creative arts practitioner, and I programme the children's events for Stratford Literary Festival. And previously I worked as the learning and participation manager for the Times and Sunday Times Cheltenham Literature Festival. So books and teaching and all of the above for me. So Sita, I'm actually going to hand straight back to you because we're going to kick off with Sita, who's going to give us a little bit of an introduction into kind of what children's rights are and where do we kind of start this conversation, and hopefully introduce a little bit of the work of Amnesty as well. So I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, so I'll start by just talking a little bit about Amnesty, and then I'll go on to talk a little bit about children's rights. So for those of you who don't know, Amnesty International is a global movement of more than 10 million people standing up for humanity and human rights. And so our purpose really is to protect people wherever justice, fairness, freedom and truth are denied. We're completely independent of any government, political ideology, economic interest or religion. And as I said before, I work for the Human Rights Education team at the UK section of Amnesty. And so what my team does is we run education programmes across the UK. So for teachers like yourselves, we develop learning resources, we produce online courses, we have this fantastic programme called the Amnesty Teacher Programme, and we also advocate for human rights education in the UK formal curricula. Our education programs are all about equipping educators to deliver human rights education. And that's not just about teaching children what their rights are, although that's a really big part of what we do, but it's actually more of a long-term interactive process. And so it's kind of got three areas of focus. One of them is that about building knowledge and understanding of rights, but it's also about kind of fostering and encouraging the attitudes and behaviours that are respectful of those rights within learners. And finally, it's kind of about building the skills of educators to uphold and protect those rights in your learning environments. I know at the end of the session, I'm going to kind of come back to this and tell you a bit more about how you can get involved in our programs, what trainings we have on offer, and what resources we have available to support you in doing this in your classroom. But for now, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about children's rights, and I'm actually going to do it through a quiz. So I've got 4 questions, so it's not too long, don't worry. And I'm going to ask you them, and then I'll go through the answers and kind of expand on them a little bit. So my first question to you all is, true or false, children are entitled to the same rights as adults? And I'll give you a couple of minutes just to have a think about that and put down your answer. Okay. My second question, again, it's a true or false. True or false, the right to play is one of the rights protected in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. For ease, I'm going to call this from now on the UNCRC, and that's just to protect me from bumbling over my words. So true or false, the right to play is one of the rights protected in the UNCRC. Okay, I'll move on to the third question. So the third question is, can you guess which is the only country in the United Nations to have not ratified the UNCRC? And by ratify, I mean legally commit to upholding. Okay, and the final question, question number 4, true or false, if our government is not upholding children's rights, there is nothing we can do. Okay, so hopefully everyone's had a chance to answer those questions. I'm not going to make you call out your answers. You can self-mark, but we can always see who won at the end of getting all of them right. So the first question, true or false, children are entitled to the same rights as adults? The answer is, drum roll, true. Thank you, Becky. True. So children and young people have the same human rights as adults, as outlined in the UDHR, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was put together in 1948. Within this document, there are 30 articles of rights that all humans, no matter what your age is, are entitled to. And this includes the right to speak out and express opinions, as well as rights to equality, health, education, a clean environment, and a safe place to live. However, in addition to that, those aged up to the age of 18 also have special rights. And this is in recognition of the unique stage of development that children are in. And it's to ensure that they are given the necessary protection and opportunities to grow into healthy, responsible adults. And these rights are outlined in the 54 articles in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is that UNCRC that I mentioned. And that was put together in 1989. And these articles, so these extra rights, are all based around the 4 Ps. There's 4 Ps. The first one is protection. And so that's all about articles that are there to ensure that children are kept safe. The second is provision. So that's to make sure that children have what they need, food, access to health, access to education, all those things. The third is about participation. And so that's ensuring that children are listened to and included in conversations. And finally, the final P is prevention of harm. And so that's laws and systems are in place to look after children. And so you can find more detail about all of these articles in the UNCRC in Jake's book. But also we have them on Amnesty's website, and you can also find them on other organisation websites like UNICEF's website, and I know that they have a lot of resources there as well if you're looking for more resources on the UNCRC. So going on to question 2, true or false? The right to play is one of the rights protected in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The answer is true. So Article number 31 of the UNCRC states that every child has a right to rest, relax, play, and take part in cultural and creative activities. And what's really important to stress here is a child's right to play is of equal importance to their right to education, their right to health, their right to safety. And this is one of the fundamental principles of human rights and also children's rights, is their indivisibility. Sorry, I always struggle with that word. But no right is more important than another. They're all interrelated. All rights are needed equally for a child to live freely and to reach their full potential. And I think that's really important to stress and for us to know as adults, and particularly as adults working with children as well. And so moving on to question 3, which is, can you guess which is the only country in the United Nations to have not ratified the UNCRC? Well, the country is, I don't know how to do it anymore, it's the USA. So whilst the USA has signed the treaty, so all 197 member states of the United Nations have signed this treaty, it has not ratified it. And I'll go into a bit more detail about the difference of ratification and signing in a second. But even though the USA hasn't ratified it, 196 countries have. And that actually makes the UNCRC the most ratified treaty in history, which is fantastic and shows how important all countries think that children's rights are. So that's really important to remember. Now, the terms ratification and signing of treaties can be a bit confusing, I think. I certainly found it that way when I first started learning about human rights. But what that basically means is that they're part of the formal process by which countries express their consent to be bound by an international agreement, which is what the UNCRC is. So when you sign a treaty, that's one of the initial steps in the treaty-making process. And what that does is it signifies that a country supports the terms of the treaty. However, and this is key, signing a treaty does not create a binding legal obligation. However, ratifying a treaty is a formal process by which a state expresses its consent to be legally bound by the treaty. So once a state ratifies a treaty, it is committed to adhering to its terms. Now, the UK ratified the UNCRC in 1991, which is actually older than I am. So when it did that, it committed to fully implementing the rights and obligations set out in the convention and to report periodically to the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child on its progress. And so what happens is every 5 years, the UN Committee will do a report on how the UK is progressing in that. The most recent report was actually in 2023, and it's got a lot of details. It's got some things that the UK have done to progress this, but there's also a lot there which needs work on. And that kind of brings us to our final kind of question, which is true or false. If our government is not upholding children's rights, there is nothing we can do. And the answer is, of course, false. So we know that the government has consented to be legally bound to upholding the rights of the child outlined in the UNCRC. And whilst I think all of us can agree that there is often a huge gap between child's right in principle and what happens in practice, but we are not powerless. And that's really important to remember. What's really important as well is that we know what these rights are, so we can hold our government accountable for ensuring that these commitments are recognised and upheld. And I think one of the most important things to raise here is that under Article 42 of the UNCRC, governments make a commitment to educate all children and adults about child rights. Now, there was a 2021 YouGov poll, and that found that 83% of British children felt that they knew little or nothing about their own rights. And only 16% of British adults knew that children have more rights than adults do. And ignorance of these rights puts children and young people at greater risk of abuse, discrimination, and exploitation. Knowledge is key. knowledge empowers children to be able to claim their rights for themselves and for others. And this is where all of you come in as teachers and educators, and why books like this, Jake's Our Rights, and the learning resources that Becky had put together are so important. And so I'm going to hand back over now to Becky to tell us a bit more about that.
Amazing, thank you. That is so interesting, because I obviously read up a lot about the rights when I was, creating these teaching resources for the book, but it made much more sense the way you said it. So thank you for that. That was really helpful. I am going to hand over to Jake to actually properly introduce this book that we keep waving at you like we're just, here it is. I'm going to hand over to Jake to introduce the book properly and talk a little bit more about children's rights and human rights in great literature.
Thanks, Becky. So yeah, it was really good to hear sort of Sita's introduction there. One of the reasons why it was very nice to have that, I think scene setting's incredibly important, but also Amnesty International were absolutely fundamental in the creation of Our Rights, the book. So the background to it really started way back in 2016, when CILIP, which is the Library and Information Association, and Amnesty International worked together on something called the Amnesty CILIP Honour. And the idea was that we wanted to recognise children's books that were raising awareness of human rights, celebrating the values of freedom, truth, justice and fairness, and contributing to a better understanding of any one or more of our human rights as stated in the UN Declaration of Human Rights and on the Convention on the Rights of the Child, as Sita was talking about. So we had 3 years of working together on this prize. And alongside that, we also did quite a lot of collaborative work. So Amnesty provided guidance to authors, illustrators and publishers, which we then sort of disseminated to every nominated author, illustrator and publisher for the award. We had guidance that Amnesty produced on all of the shortlisted books for the awards that went out to the many thousands of shadowing groups around the country. And that was all about exploring human rights issues through those shortlisted books. And we invited Amnesty to participate in the Youth Libraries Group conference. And in return, we took part in a big symposium that Amnesty organised. And it was kind of as a consequence of that symposium that Our Rights was born, the collection of short stories and poetry, because I was there with Janetta Otterbarry from Otterbarry Books. And we were talking about the fact that in 2019, the 30th anniversary of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child would be coming up. And we felt that it would be really good to look at producing some kind of a publication that celebrated those rights and that tied back to the point that Sita was making around the lack of awareness that sometimes children have, and that acted as a tool for teachers, educators, promoters of great literature like librarians can use. Things then got quite complicated because of the pandemic, which obviously happened. So things got slowed down an awful lot. So yeah, it took a long time. But we were able to work with a huge number of different poets, authors, and indeed illustrators. We worked with some underrepresented illustrators who were very, very new to the field, giving them the opportunity to illustrate all of the short stories and poems. And it was a fantastic project. I think one of the things that we kind of discovered as we were going through, we'd initially discussed having a short story or a poem that tied to different rights. We actually found that that was a bit sort of stultifying, and that what happens, Sita spoke about the intersectionality of the rights, and we found that a lot. The stories were straddling a lot of different rights, and the poetry was straddling a lot of different rights. So yeah, it was a really eye-opening project, and it's been fantastic to see some of the different ways that it's been used by schools and libraries, and some of the conversations that it's been starting.
Amazing, thank you. So I'm going to take you through in a little bit more detail about kind of what kinds of things you find in the book, and also if you're thinking about talking about the book and using oh my goodness, my brain, talking about human rights in the classroom and using the book, that's the right way around, then Jake very kindly commissioned me to create a set of teaching resources that will be available on the Otterbury website on their resources page. They're not currently up. We were hoping they might be ready in time for today, but not quite, very, very soon. So I'm going to take you through the Word doc version. So you're getting a kind of behind the scenes here of how you might want to use this book in the classroom to talk about children's rights. So I'm going to share my screen. We can have a look. So, first thing to say is that there are 11 short stories and 11 poems within the book. Obviously, we have the regular contents page, but what I've done within this set of teaching notes is I've listed them here. So if you wanted to specifically find a poem, then these are the ones that are specifically poems, and if you wanted to find a short story, they're here. So here are some of the authors and poets that are within the anthology. So, I mean, such an amazing array. There really is something for every reader, I think, within this book. You know, from Beverly Naidoo to Chita Saundar to Benjamin Zephaniah. I mean, the list is there. It's an amazing list. Do have a look. And it's also definitely worth checking out the other stories and books and poems that these authors have written, because I have included at the end a list of their websites. So if you are interested, if you do read one of the short stories or one of the poems and think, oh, this is, you know, my class has loved this, I really want to do more with this author, then you can check out their websites as well and find out about their other works. Particularly people like A.M. Dasu, all her books are very, very kind of focused on rights and kind of social justice and issues like that. So definitely worth checking out. And here are the illustrators as well that Jake mentioned, who were maybe underrepresented and fairly new to illustration when they took part. So the notes have been written specifically for teachers in Key Stage 2. All the stories and poems are suitable for children aged 8+. There are some stories that might, you know, you might need a little bit more sensitivity for, depending on the, you know, the needs and experiences of the children in your class. That's obviously kind of down to you. So I have included a little bit of the legal bit, just, you know, I'm sure you were writing furiously whilst Ethan was talking, but here's a little bit of introduction to the legal stuff as well, so you know that kind of what you're talking about is correct. And there are also the actual children's rights are in the back of the book as well, so you can keep kind of cross-referencing when you're reading the stories and poems to the rights at the back. And there are the 4 Ps that Sita was talking about as well, so you can find out more here. So in terms of introductory activities, so the way these notes have been designed, I've got a list of kind of introductory activities that you might want to do, some specific activities related to poetry, specific activities related to spoken language, some for narrative writing, some for non-fiction writing, and then I've included a couple of cross-curricular ideas as well. So I'm just going to kind of maybe go through one idea for each of those areas that you can kind of know now. And then if you want to kind of come back later when they're on the website, on the Otterbury website, you can check out some more as well. So for example, for an introductory activity, there is a poem by Jackie Morris, which is one of the first in the book. I think it is the first poem in the book actually, called Imagine. And I'm suggesting that you share the poem in which Jackie is asking the reader to imagine a better world for all children, and asking everyone to work together to make that world a reality, that kind of, you know, utopian idea of wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all live in peace and be happy and all that stuff, and getting your children to think about, you know, what could they do to make that better world a reality? What are the values and rights within your school? What is the world that you would imagine? So you could use the third verse as an inspiration. So the third verse is, imagine a world where no child is hungry, where no child has to run from war, where all children are safe. So you might want to do an exercise around imagine a world where, and then guide them to write their own version of the poem, focusing on their school or focusing on their country, you know, depending on the age and how kind of big you want to get. That might be a nice way of starting off the conversation about our rights. In terms of poetry, again, I've got, I think, three poetry exercises that you might want to do. So one, for example, is on Valerie Bloom's poem, The Soldier. So The Soldier is, let me quickly find it, should have marked the page. Where are you? 70, page 70. So The Soldier by Valerie Bloom. The poem seems to be about a soldier's experience, but then there's a twist at the end that the soldier's only a child. So it's a very impactful poem. It's a very impactful ending, that kind of twist. So you might want to ask your pupils to talk about the ending of the poem and how does that ending make them feel? It also lends itself really well to performance. If you wanted to cross over between poetry and spoken language and performance poetry, you might want to get them to prepare a performance of the poem. You might want to rewrite the poem or rewrite a different poem that has a twist ending. So you think it's about one thing and then it's actually about something else to hit home with a powerful message. That could be a nice way of exploring that one. In terms of short stories, here are the short stories in this book. I'm going to suggest something. So this is around spoken language. So these are the ideas around spoken language. So for example, there's a story called Charles II, where two children learn to, they start off not liking their names. They think their unique names are embarrassing, but they learn over the course of the story to sort of love and embrace their names. So it might be nice to reflect on, your pupils to reflect on what makes them unique. Does their name have a special meaning? Or, or kind of drawing it out more to, do they have a special talent? What are their strengths? And getting them to think a little bit about their own kind of, something that's special about them as a person, and doing maybe a presentation on what makes them unique, or, making a poster or something that's celebrating them as a person, and kind of, following the story, learning to kind of appreciate your own uniqueness. Or potentially the A.M. Dasu story, the child in that story is asked to write a speech on an inspirational person, and she struggles with it because she wants to do her mum, but she's embarrassed about her mum. She wears a hijab, and it's about her kind of learning. Suddenly, by the end of the story, not spoilers, she learns to see her mum as a real superhero. Her mum's a nurse, and she saves someone, and it's a really, really lovely moment. And she realizes that actually her mum is her inspiration. And you might want your pupils to think about someone that they find inspirational, that's very personal to them, someone they know, or an inspirational person from history, or a celebrity, or someone like that, and to really focus on why that person is inspirational to them. And do a speech or do some sort of presentation on it. That's a possibility. In terms of narrative writing, I've got two suggestions there. So there's a story called Faduma and the Lion Man, which is from an oral storytelling tradition. So you might want to do some research in oral storytelling, or the region of Somalia where it came from, and then practice the oral retelling as a class, or focus on the characters. So explore their personalities, and perhaps do some rewriting of the story, or asking your pupils to change the ending. It has kind of, that oral storytelling tradition. It's kind of like a fable. So you might want to change the ending and see how that changes the moral or the lesson of the story as well. Non-fiction writing. So a few examples here. The Maisie Chan story is called The Adoption Club, and that story told in diary entries from the perspective of different adopted children. So that might be a nice way of exploring kind of what adoption is, and why a child might need to be adopted by another family. In the story, one of the characters really struggles to kind of navigate being from two different worlds, from being from a Chinese family originally and coming to the UK. So trying to build that empathy of asking your pupils to imagine how it would feel to be adopted to another country, and to maybe write a diary entry about their own feelings and experiences. And kind of the flip side of that is to encourage them to explore the positives of having two cultures. So it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes, that means you've got twice the wonderful things about a culture. So, focusing on the positives as well as the challenges. And then some cross-curricular work ideas. So Nicola Davies has a poem which is I think it's the last one in the book, called Every Child a Song. So this obviously would be a lovely way to kind of connect to your music lessons. So thinking about, well, what does that mean, every child a song? So, asking your pupils to reflect on the question, if you were a song, what would you sound like? Or if you were a note, which note would you be and why? And getting them to think about those elements of music. Maybe adding some instruments to be feeling good, maybe doing it vocally, or doing it with like a soundscape, so everyone kind of choosing a different sound that you can then build up together to kind of make a class song. You could also just have some children read the poem while you have some music in the background, or even just the final 3 lines, which are sing joy, sing love, sing freedom. So it's a lovely kind of ending. So you might want to just focus on that and use that to make a song as well. So there's lots of ways in which you could introduce these ideas of children's rights through really creative and fun ways in literacy lessons and beyond, and cross-curricular as well. So further resources. So I've obviously linked to Amnesty, BBC, Bitesize and Newsround have lots of kind of videos and articles that you might be interested in. And then there are some book lists as well. So if you're looking for other books which are exploring children's rights, obviously, as I said, you can check out the authors who contributed to the book, but there are also some book lists that Book Trust have done, Scottish Book Trust have done, Amnesty have done, that are lists of books that all explore children's rights in their own way. So there's lots and lots of resources out there if your children are interested and they want to know more, or you want to explore more in the classroom. So that was a whistle-stop tour of a very long document. So, and as I said, it will look much more beautiful and teacher-friendly once it's all beautifully designed. But that kind of gives you an idea of the kinds of things that are in the resources and the kinds of things that are in the book. And we do encourage you to take a look if you're interested. It's a good starting place. So I am going to hand back to Sita now to talk a little bit more about Amnesty's education programs. So how can people get involved? What kind of programs are there available?
Lovely, thank you, Becky, and thank you, Jake. It was lovely to hear about the book and to hear more about the learning resources as well. So thank you both. Yeah, so I'm going to talk just briefly about the kind of education programs at Amnesty, and I'm going to put some links in the chat if I can. Although I will say I don't usually use Zoom, so if I get slightly confused, that's why. But we have lots of programs at Amnesty that are there to support teachers. One of our main ones, I mentioned it briefly at the beginning, is the Amnesty Teacher Programme. And so that's open to primary, secondary, further education teachers. It's over the course of a year. There's one kind of session per term. There is a course fee to take part in this training. It's £50, I believe, but it's free for trainee teachers and those in their first year of teaching. And it's basically a way of learning more about human rights education and being supported to apply that to your teaching. And so you'll have one-to-one mentoring sessions with one of my wonderful colleagues in the team. And it's a really fantastic program that we've been running for a number of years. And so I'm going to try now and link that in the chat. Watch this space. Oh yeah, okay, it's quite straightforward. I think I've got it. There we go. Great. And so that's really a great program that we have. But what we also have is we've got a load of learning resources available on our website. And these cover lesson plans, they cover whole modules that you can do with your students. So we've got a secondary pack of learning resources, which has lesson plans, activities that you can pick and choose from all around human rights. So we've got secondary, primary. We're currently developing a further education pack, which hopefully will be released later this year. So do watch this space on that one. I'll send the link here as well to where all of our resources are. But we also have a lot of resources that you can order, like posters. We've got little human rights passports. I usually have one with me, but I've lost mine, and I usually have one with me all the time. But it's a little pink passport that you can order for your students, and it just goes through all of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in really kind of friendly language for young people to engage with. They can take it away. You can order for the whole school through our website. All the resources are free for you to order, so do use them. And we really recommend kind of ordering the posters, putting them up around your classroom, getting them in the school. You never know what that could inspire in a child if they're, daydreaming maybe one day and they look upon one of our lovely colourful posters, which is telling them all about their rights. It's all about, I think, planting seeds. Sometimes you never know what they might engage with and want to take forward from that. We have leaflets, we've got little booklets about Amnesty so they can learn more about Amnesty. We've got badges, we've got loads of things on our website, so do take a look because they're there to be used. And another really kind of important program that we do run, I mentioned it before as being one of my favorite projects to work on, is Words That Burn. Now we have 10 lesson plans available on our website. And you can find them on Teaching Young People, that link I've already posted there. And these are for secondary, students at the moment. So the 10 lesson plans, they're all about exploring poetry and human rights with your students and empowering them to find their voice. And I think it's a really good way of getting them to creatively express themselves, and to have the opportunity to really just think about themselves, think about human rights, think about what matters to them, and put that down to paper in a really nice, creative way. We work with poets and young people to develop these learning resources. So each learning resource has a video with a poet, and we've got loads of different things on there. So do take a look. As I said, at the moment, it's for secondary audiences. However, we are hopefully planning on doing a set of resources for primary as well. But what I would say is within those resources, take a look, because there's little activities that you could take out and use with your students, and adapt them. You are the experts with your young people. You know what will work with them, what won't. But there's a whole host of things there that you can build on, and use if you want to. We also have a whole load of online courses that are free. So we've got Amnesty Academy, and that's got a load of different courses and lots of different themes. We've got one actually on child's rights, and so I'm going to post here again all our resources on child rights, and that's like a free, I think it's 90-minute course, and it's all about children's rights. We've got another one which is an introduction to human rights, which is really useful as well. We also have available up there a course on human rights education, and that's another 90-minute course. It's for educators. It's all about what is human rights education, how can you apply it in your teaching. It's got ideas for planning lessons. It's got loads of different things. It's got examples of activists and stuff that you can use when you're talking to your young people. So do take a look. As I say, they're all there. They're available for free. Some of them as well, you might think, especially if you're working in secondary and in further education, you might think that some of these online courses would be good for your students to do as part of their personal development, or as part of a lesson that you're running. So have a look, see what we've got there. And yeah, so we have all these resources. We want people to use them. We want people to engage with us. You can sign up for our Teach Rights, and that is a newsletter, a monthly newsletter from us at Amnesty, and we have everything that we're doing. We have kind of news about different events that we're running, different trainings. We are constantly building our program. We're constantly trying to put together new trainings, new activities for people to engage with, and we always welcome teacher feedback about what you'd like to see us doing, and how you'd like to get involved. So do take a look at our website. And just before I go, I will just say one last thing as well. For secondary teachers and further education is Amnesty Youth Groups, which is where you can your students can set up a youth group, yeah, there's all information on our website about that as well.
Amazing, thank you. There's so much out there, and it's so much of it is free, so everyone should absolutely check it out. Thank you, Sita. So we're sort of wrapping up now, so we thought we'd leave a couple minutes at the end just in case anyone had any questions for Sita about Amnesty's work, if anyone had any questions for Jake or myself about the Our Rights book or the teaching notes, or just think any questions. So we'll all go silent for a couple of minutes in case anyone wants to pop anything in the chat, and then we'll wrap up.
Can I just ask
Yes, please.
Yeah. When was this book published? Sorry, forgive my ignorance. When was it published?
Was it 2019, Jake?
Okay.
Or is it more recently than that? Hang on, I've got it right here. Oh, no, it's 2023.
2023. And
2023.
have you had, what kind of responses have you had from, primary, secondary, further education sectors, teachers, just generally? I mean, how's it been received, would you say, by the sort of teaching world?
Yeah, I would say it's early days for the teaching world. Yeah. So, I mean, generally it's been received really well, but that has been on quite a general sort of basis. Anecdotally, teachers who've spoken to me have spoken very positively about it, and have said that I've spoken to quite a number of teachers who say that they have the rights up on sort of classroom walls, but they haven't really done much more than that, and that this has provided an opportunity to do a little bit more than that. But hopefully the teaching notes that Sita and Becky have been working on together will give a real opportunity to open the doors wide for lots of schools to take part and to use.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds absolutely brilliant. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but it sounds really fantastic. And do you automatically send it to exam boards, for example, for them to consider at all? I just wondered.
I have to admit, I don't know anything about that side of it. So
curriculum teams might be interested. I don't know, because obviously, you know, yeah. Anyway, well done. It sounds fantastic.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, it sounds like a good idea, Jake. I have to get on to Otterbury, see if they want to talk to some exam boards. It would be good. Thank you. Any other questions? And I said chat, but please do feel free to jump on and talk to us. We love that. No one ever wants to do it. I was so pleased you did, Elizabeth. No one ever wants to talk to us in real life. Any more for any more? No. Well, I'll tell you what, if you think of a burning question after we finish, you can always email the English Association and they can pass it on and we'll try and get you an answer. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand back to Becky to wrap us up for the evening.
Thank you. Well, it just forced me to do the really nice bit, which is to say a huge thank you to Becky and to Jake and to Sita for just sharing so warmly all this amazing work that you're doing with us. If there's anything we can do to spread the word to teachers that these incredible resources are out there, let us know and we'll do it with bells on. And the recording of this session will be available later this week. I'll email the link around. Do share it with your networks so that everyone can benefit. And yeah, everybody now go and have a lovely evening. Thank you.